Alright, so behind me is my Case 930 series tractor. I picked this up not that long ago for a little above free basically, and I really want to figure out what's going on with this thing. I want to use it for some tillage work this spring in some of the hay fields that I'm working. I don't know if we'll actually be able to, however, because it does have a problem with the hydraulics. These 3-point arms, they take forever to actually raise up. And then there's the other thing that I just discovered. This thing is so ugly, it's gonna need a paint job someday. So I was editing the video about this thing, and I noticed when the tractor wasn't running, the oil pressure gauge is still reading oil pressure, which it is still doing even though this thing probably hasn't been running in, if I had to guess, 3 or 4 weeks. So that's bad. That means the gauge isn't working, and I honestly have no idea if this engine's producing any sort of oil pressure whatsoever. This is causing flashbacks back to the Zetter incident where I bought a used tractor, told everything's fine with it, you know, ready to go pretty much. Turns out that's not producing oil pressure, and it self-destructed on its way out to the field the very first day I attempted to use it. Now I know to make sure things have oil pressure, and since that's an unknown with this, we need to figure out if it actually is or not. And the other thing is to fix the hydraulic problem and go through the absolute, you know, death trap level wiring on this poor old tractor. We got to get it in the shop anyway. But before we do that, I'm going to hose this thing off because I've learned that having a good pressure washer is one of the greatest things ever if you work on your own machinery, because there's a ton of nasty filth all over the tractor. You know, all things considered, it's actually extremely clean. You know, for a mechanical device that's been around since Vietnam era, it's remarkably clean. But if we can get it cleaner, that'll make it easier to pinpoint leaks and other such problems. So let's see if this thing will fire up, and I guess we'll clean it up and then try to figure out what the deal is with this. I really hope it's nothing major. Hopefully it's just a bad gauge. All right, we'll turn on the fuel, which leaks. That's what makes this thing so hard to start. Look at that, fuel all over these lines and all over that axle. It's alright, we can fix it. Now we gotta come over here to the batteries. I unhooked them because the wiring on this is super sketchy. I don't know what happened to these, but I wish that whoever did whatever happened to this had not. Dang it. Oh, maybe we can start it on one battery. Oh, what a disaster. Why do people do things like that? Okay, I'm not optimistic, but it might work. Nope. Alright, it's kind of on there, but that whole terminal thing is coming apart, so who knows. Alright, I think it'll work. Give this thing full throttle to try and compensate for the air in that fuel. I hate jacking with stuff like this. Oh, this is so messed up. Alright, you know what? I'm not gonna fix this. It's all coming out of here, so we're just gonna wash it here, and then I'm gonna rewire it out here in the yard. Is it ideal? No, not really, but this is like what I always say. When it comes to electrical problems on old tractors, you really have two options. You can just break down and replace all the wiring when you first get the thing and just be done with it, or you're just always gonna have to screw with it. And that seems to be what's happening here, and I don't really have the patience. So, and I'll feel a lot better once all this nasty stuff is out of here, because I worry about this tractor like bursting into flames in the middle of the night if one of these missing chunks of insulation catches on something. Alright, let's see if we can clean this old monster up. So, Old Ugly is looking well, I guess about as ugly as ever, but I was actually able to remove at least some of that paint off of everything here. I don't know what the deal is with this. I don't know if it was painted with a mop or what, but at least some of this came off. Some of these tractors I don't plan to paint at all. I plan to leave their original patina. Others don't look like they're gonna be that hard to paint. And this thing, well, this thing's gonna have to go down to bare metal at some point, but that's a battle for another day. Now I know you guys are thinking, Chucky, you gotta be really careful pressure washing stuff like that, unless you got water in the oil. Ah, it's disgusting. Ugh. So check it out, everything is removed except for the original tachometer, which I'm going to try to take out in one piece. Check this out. Oh, that might still work. It might be as simple as just putting a new cable in this. And the cable looks fine, but I think these usually break on the inside if they break. I gotta go through and pick up all this wire. I can't even imagine why there's this much wire on this tractor. There's just not that much in the way of electrical stuff, but there's a lot that came out of that. And is it a little excessive? Perhaps, but we must remember that excessive is a relative term, and one man's excessively violent is another's entirely too merciful. And like I said, I just don't want to deal with this problem again, so we're gonna do it once and for all. Let's see if I can get that tachometer out of this thing, because it would be kind of cool to reuse the original. I checked, you can get both, I guess factory spares, and also restoration quality ones, and nobody really knows how good the restoration quality of restoration quality parts are, so I'd kind of prefer to reuse this one. Okay, so the cable feels pretty stiff. I don't know if it's intact and it's just not gonna move because it's got the engine on the other side of it, or if perhaps it is broken off and just like rusted solid on the inside. So what I'm gonna do is try and, oh, it's moving a little bit. I think it still might work. I don't actually wanna damage it though, so I'm just gonna order a new tachometer cable. Yeah, I don't know. Might feel a little loosey-goosey. It's like 55 bucks, it's worth a try. There is a hole worn through the side of the speedometer, or rusted through. Maybe it was hit with something, you know, like impaled. I used to try to figure out things that could cause damage like this on farm equipment, but now I just shake my head, throw this in the scrap bin, and order another one. It's like I always say, when it comes to things like this, if you have to ask, you don't want to know. Gonna feed this, oh, you can't see anything. I'm feeding this through the grommet on the firewall so the insulation doesn't get rubbed off on this sharp metal. There, like that. Gotta make sure this isn't gonna get too close to this exhaust manifold and melt. All right, now I gotta stick a fuse in it and it's ready to plug into the ignition switch. Alright, so I've been working on this case off and on for the last couple of weeks just as I have free time, and let me show you all what we got here. We got all new wiring on everything. This is the essentially grid heater, whatever they call that technically, the engine preheat. New wire for the solenoid to that. I got a battery disconnect in here, so if the tractor's not going to be used for a little while, I don't have to worry about that going dead. All new battery cables everywhere. Got a new seat, put that on. Oh, hi, buddy. And over here, we got new gauges, temperature gauge, oil gauge, and a voltage gauge, which is defective right out of the box. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I ordered a replacement, but it's not here yet. And yes, I know it's defective because I took a multimeter and measured across the terminals on the back of that, and everything reads just fine. It's just the gauge doesn't do anything. Oh, and then everything down there. New copper oil line for the gauge. And that as well, I like to use the old mechanical gauges wherever possible. And more new wiring everywhere, brand new fuel lines, and then everything that I've put down in here as well. We got a new solenoid on the starter. Yeah, I think this is the line from the alternator that charges the battery. More new battery cables, new fuel lines. And one of the problems with these tractors is they can occasionally have some issues with the gravity flow design. This does not use a fuel pump, which is kind of interesting. It's supposed to be gravity flow, but the extra few PSI that this will provide should help this thing start a lot easier and just in general increase performance. So we got that on there. And I got to thinking about it, and it's like, hey, this thing's supposed to have a water separator, isn't it? And it does, kind of. The water separator is that thing. It's literally just a divot in the tank itself, and there's supposed to be a valve on it that the manual specifically says to drain every day before use, and this one has probably not been drained in a very, very long time, and the valve was stuck, and of course it broke when I was trying to free it, but it's not leaking, so I figure we're just gonna leave that. And I added this over here as well. This is actually a water separator and filter combination. These are supposed to be used for transfer tanks, like in the back of pickups, and I've essentially fitted it to the tractor. We got this piece of scrap steel back here. This is actually part of my old high lift jack. I had to cut it down shorter so it fit in my truck's toolbox. And we got these hose clamps running through some divots in that, so hopefully the whole thing doesn't just like vibrate off the bottom. And I went to, of all places, the local big box store, and I bought this thing. It's for like 3-inch plastic to, yeah, 3-inch plastic. I guess it's for like splicing PVC pipes together or something. But this is some nice thick 1/4-inch rubber with some stainless steel hose clamps, I presume. And so I figured that's gonna be perfect for this. We now have a real water separator on here, and what's cool is with the added filter in this, the tractor's fuel filters should last pretty much indefinitely. So I guess that pretty much just leaves this down in here. You remember the original fuel shutoff was leaking majorly, and so I replaced the entire thing, and it does not seem to be leaking. I've not turned it on until just right now. It seemed to be holding just fine. I added like probably 3 gallons of fuel to the tank of this thing, which is pretty empty. This is supposed to be, if I remember right, a 55-gallon tank. So, okay, check for leaks. I don't see any leaks there. I've not had this thing running yet, but I did use the fuel pump to pump some fuel through it before I started working on the fuel lines. Don't see anything coming through here, so let's see. That battery disconnect. It's gonna have to suck through all the all that air. It's starting to trickle. Also, based on how clingy this dog is, there's about an 80% chance it's gonna rain tonight. Yeah, because you won't leave me alone, will you? No, you won't. Yeah, dude, it's gonna rain. It's gonna be the end of the universe. It's the worst thing ever. This is why we call him Hover Dog. Or Weather Dog, specifically. He's pretty accurate. He's a lot more accurate than the meteorologists on TV. It is probably gonna rain, and it's even starting to look like it a little bit. Yeah, it's still raining. Not as much as it was, though. So I'll be honest with you guys, I pretty much rage quit a little bit last night. It was getting to be so cold I couldn't really feel my fingers, and the main problem is this water separator has a simply catastrophic leak. All right, we are majorly in business. Back out here working on the 930 series case today. What have I done? I've been out here working on this a little bit. I got to thinking, and previously we had next to no fuel flow, just a tiny, tiny, tiny trickle, and so I reconfigured these lines so it goes tank, fuel pump, then filter. I wanted to have the filter before the fuel pump to protect it, but I mean, you know, I guess worst case scenario is we shred a $12 Chinese fuel pump here, and the fuel that is coming through this looks pretty clean. I got to thinking, you know, like in most pickups, there's the fuel pump inside the tank and it goes through the filter on a frame rail, so I guess it's fine if these pump unfiltered fuel. And the reason why I did this is because, like I said, we were just getting a trickle into this filter. The filter was also leaking. I messed with it. So far it is not leaking, and I went to test the fuel volume and fuel pressure. I popped this line off here and it's just like whoosh, just spraying all over the side of the tractor instantly. So that's definitely been fixed. We're getting fuel up to these filters here, and I think it's time to try and start this thing. Keep in mind, this old tractor has not been started in probably over a month. But this is going to be the big moment, because we'll find out if we actually have oil pressure in this thing. All right, that's the starter solenoid. Or I'm sorry, the preheater solenoid. Because it's been sitting, we'll let that crank for maybe a little bit longer here. Maximum fuel. Oh no! That's supposed to make it start. Wiring looks okay. I wonder if this is a defective solenoid. You gotta be kidding me. Oh, that's that. Man, this is really weird. Alright, so I looked around on the internet and it looks like I had this wired backwards, but I'm not really sure because the original solenoid was like this aftermarket one which someone damaged, whereas the terminals are vertical like that. This one, as you can see, they're more horizontal. So that means it doesn't really fit with the copper bar except for one way, which is how I had it. And I'm thinking that might not have been the correct way right now. So anyway, yeah, I've wired it backwards. I had to make like a little 4-inch long battery cable to make it work, but this is best I can figure the next thing to try. So, oh, okay, that worked a little too well. Oh, this might be it. That's it. We got it. Okay, well, shame on me for assuming the only way that an aftermarket part fits on the machine is the correct way, but we made it fit. Should be it. Gonna give this all a break. I don't like how that oil pressure gauge is not climbing. That is making me nervous. All right, where's my starter fluid? That's how you know it hasn't been started in a while. I don't know where the can went. Oh, there it is. That's something, and we got oil pressure. Pressure washing, it's like working its way down and hitting that fan and getting launched this way, so glad I'm wearing safety squints. 5 of 6 have been bled. This one I cannot get off if my life depended on it, so yeah, I can't. It's gonna be hard to access down there. Well, there is it. I don't know. I didn't really try that. Let me try bleeding it there. But man, will this thing is. It's deafening just standing here, and that's with a muffler. Not seeing any leaks yet. It's alive! Will it idle now? I want to get it warmed up, then change the oil and adjust those valves. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little concerned about the volume of smoke this thing makes. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is pretty cool. But this seems perhaps a little excessive. It is charging. I'm pretty sure that's my second bad Bosch gauge in a row because I already replaced the one that was in there earlier. Maybe I'll just take a multimeter with me everywhere. It's more reliable. Man, this thing has smoothed out a lot just as it's been sitting here warming up. Goodness, something is sounding a little on the loosey-goosey side, and there's some uncomfortable vibrations underneath my feet. I think it's probably about as warm as it's going to get unless I'm really working it. So I think what I'm going to do is start in on the maintenance of this piece. And maybe look around on the internet and make sure I can still buy rings for it. Okay, well, such concludes this video-y. I'm not gonna lie, my heart skipped a couple beats when I realized this thing was not registering oil pressure, but luckily this time, nothing malicious, simply an old gauge no longer worked. But I'm very happy to see this turn out the way that it has. I wasn't really planning to rewire this whole tractor in this video, but that's just the way it turned out, and I guess now it's time to start changing all the fluids in this and start in on some backlogged maintenance and see what comes next. So, I am really happy with this old thing. Doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it. Just a little bit of a mess from all the wires and all these hoses I gotta move around. But I think we're in pretty good shape, so I wanna see how much quieter this thing gets after probably its first valve adjustment in the entire time I've been alive, and also an oil change, and a coolant flush. Probably some other stuff. Oh yeah, that reminds me. Oh, okay, that has not been off of there in quite a while. I'm guessing this needs a new filter as well. Okay, well, let's see what happens next.